Is this some kind of joke? The young officer's voice dripped with mockery as she stepped out of the patrol car, a dismissive sneer plastered across her face. Leonard Lynn Donovan, at 82 years old, remained utterly still on his vintage motorcycle, hands steady on the worn handlebars, his calm eyes fixed on the distant horizon. The two officers exchanged impatient glances. "License and registration, and step off that bike. Now, sir," the female officer commanded, her voice firm, one hand already resting pointedly on her holstered weapon. What they couldn't possibly know was that in a mere handful of minutes, a convoy of 50 military personnel, led by a determined captain, would arrive in Humvees, specifically looking for whoever had dared to impede Leonard Donovan. The subtle hum of a hidden surveillance drone, high above, unnoticed by the officers, had already begun to relay the unfolding scene to an unseen command. For the past 40 years, Leonard Donovan had risen at precisely 5 a.m. every single day. Discipline wasn't just a habit, it was the bedrock of his very being, still coursing through his veins. His modest farm lay roughly 10 miles outside of town, a quiet sanctuary where he cultivated a small vineyard, an unexpected hobby for a man of his past. Yesterday, his trusty 1978 John Deere tractor had given up the ghost, its hydraulic system failing. Lynn knew exactly which part was to blame. 42 years of meticulously fixing machines had taught him to identify every bolt, every gear, every intricate component with the precision of a surgeon. Tucked away in his old, rusty garage sat a magnificent 1970 Harley-Davidson shovelhead. Its engine, a deep, resonant rumble, roared like distant thunder when ignited, a sound that always made the hairs on his arms stand on end. Lynn cared little for aesthetics. The bike functioned flawlessly, it got him where he needed to go, and that was all that mattered. At 82, he navigated its power with more finesse than most men in their 20s, his reflexes honed by decades of rigorous military training that few civilians could ever comprehend. He possessed an almost preternatural awareness of his surroundings, a situational consciousness that had never dulled, a carryover from a life lived on the razor's edge. But, of course, no one saw any of that when their gaze only registered an old man on an old motorcycle, a relic from a bygone era. Life's irony could be brutally cruel. Those with the most profound lessons to impart were often precisely the ones who appeared to have nothing at all to say, dismissed by superficial judgments. The traffic light at the town's edge turned red. Lynn brought the Harley to a smooth stop beside the familiar gas station where he usually filled up. The engine vibrated beneath him, a deep, steady thrum that echoed between the storefronts and houses, a comforting rhythm. That low, comforting roar of the old Harley fell silent the instant he spotted the insistent flash of police lights in his rearview mirror. Officer Ava Sterling, 28 years old, 3 years into her city patrol, approached the bike with long, confident strides, her mirrored sunglasses reflecting the morning sky like unreadable eyes. "Is this a joke?" she repeated, her tone dismissive, as she exited her patrol cruiser. "Sir, shut off that junk now." Lynn didn't move, remaining seated on the bike, hands steadfast on the handlebars, his eyes calm, locked on the horizon, an unyielding calm that often disarmed those unfamiliar with true resolve. Sterling and her partner, Officer Ben Carter, a burly man with a perpetually bored expression, exchanged impatient glances. "License and registration, and step off the motorcycle now." Sterling's voice was firm, her hand already resting pointedly on her holstered sidearm, a gesture designed to intimidate. Lynn, unhurried, as if performing a practice drill, handed over his documents, everything meticulously organized within a worn, brown leather wallet. Sterling eyed the license with suspicion. 82 years old, she murmured, a skeptical eyebrow raised, a faint sneer playing on her lips. "Don't you think you're a little too old to be riding a motorcycle?" Officer Carter, a wide grin spreading across his face, joined them. He surveyed the old bike from top to bottom. "Man, this Harley's older than my dad. Look at all that rust. Hands on the bike, sir. Feet apart." Sterling ordered, her voice sharp, a hint of impatience creeping in. The search was entirely unnecessary, a clear exercise in petty authority, and both officers knew it, yet they proceeded anyway, fueled by a misguided sense of control. A small crowd began to gather, drawn by the flashing lights and the raised voices, murmurs filling the air like a growing hum of disapproval. "Mr. Donovan, where do you live?" Sterling pressed, her voice edged with suspicion. "On a farm nearby, just off Highway 340. "Alone?" Sterling exchanged a loaded glance with Carter, a silent communication that screamed, "Another confused old man, easy pickings." "Do you have family? Anyone who takes care of you?" I've been taking care of myself for 82 years. Yes, but don't you think it's dangerous to ride that motorcycle at your age? You could cause an accident, hurt someone, Sterling insisted, her tone shifting to mock concern, masking her true irritation. Len remained silent, his gaze still fixed on the horizon, hands clasped behind his back, a posture of quiet defiance. Sir, I'm talking to you. I'm listening. Then answer me. Don't you think it's irresponsible to ride an old bike like that at your age? Carter leaned in and whispered to Sterling, a theatrical gesture for the crowd to overhear. I think he might be a little deaf, too. Look at him, just standing there, barely responding. Sterling, seizing the opportunity to amplify the perceived defiance, raised her voice, deliberately louder. Mr. Donovan, can you hear me? Do you understand what I'm saying? The crowd grew, and with it, the hushed voices. Poor old man. Don't these cops have better things to do? He does look kind of confused. Somebody should call his family. The world, as it always does, split into factions, compassion versus judgment, especially when faced with a story unknown, a truth veiled by assumptions. Len remained silent, his eyes momentarily closing, a private moment of composure, taking a deep, fortifying breath that went unnoticed by his tormentors. He had faced far more dire situations than this, in places infinitely more dangerous, with consequences immeasurably more severe. He recalled a freezing night in Korea, pinned down by enemy fire, the smell of cordite thick in the air, or the claustrophobic dread of a covert mission in the jungles of Vietnam. But that was over 50 years ago, a lifetime away. Now, in this moment, he was merely another old man being publicly humiliated, his past valor unseen, unheard. Across the street, at his gas station, the owner, Marcus Thorne, a 58-year-old Gulf War veteran with a perpetually worried frown, stopped wiping down a fuel pump. He recognized Len instantly. Len had been a loyal customer for 15 years, always courteous, always punctual with his payments, always ready with a kind word for Marcus, even asking about his daughter's college applications. Seeing the unfolding humiliation, Marcus felt a cold fury simmer in his veins, a familiar sense of injustice that rankled. He snatched up his phone and, with trembling fingers, dialed the secure, direct line to the nearby military base at Fort Carson, a number reserved for emergencies. Hello, this is Marcus Thorne. I need to speak with an officer on duty, and it's urgent. Tell them it's about a Gray Wolf protocol situation. Back across the street, the situation spiraled further into absurdity. Officer Sterling, her irritation visibly mounting due to Len's unwavering silence, had now decided he needed to be taken to the station. Sir, you're going to have to come with us to the station, she announced, her voice sharper, lacking any pretense of politeness. Len finally spoke, his voice calm and resonating with a quiet, steely authority that seemed to cut through the din. And for what reason? For inappropriate behavior and failure to properly respond to a law enforcement officer, she snapped, pulling out her notepad as if recording a minor infraction. She paused, then added, her tone sharpening, a malicious gleam in her eye. Also, you need a medical evaluation before even thinking about riding that motorcycle again. We believe you are a danger to yourself and others. Len regarded her with the same unwavering patience he'd once used to train hundreds of raw, eager young soldiers, some barely older than Sterling herself. The same boundless patience he'd extended to 18-year-old recruits who arrived at boot camp utterly convinced they possessed all the answers to life's complexities, only to find themselves utterly lost. Ava, let me try. Officer Carter interjected, a strained, conciliatory smile on his face, sensing Sterling was pushing too far. Mr. Donovan, you understand our concern, right? A man your age, riding a bike like that. It could be dangerous. For whom? Len countered, his gaze piercing, a silent challenge in his eyes. For you? For other drivers? I've been riding for 65 years. I've never caused an accident. Yeah, but now it's different, Carter pressed, his voice laced with patronizing concern. Slower reflexes, impaired vision. The statistics are clear, sir. Len could have explained that his reflexes had been rigorously tested just 6 months prior during his annual physical, a battery of tests that would challenge a much younger man. He could have stated that he exercised daily, that his coordination surpassed that of most individuals half his age. He could have articulated all of this, but he felt no compulsion to justify his existence or his capabilities to anyone who refused to see beyond superficialities. His silence was his answer, a quiet dignity that spoke volumes. On the phone with the base, Marcus, his voice tight with controlled anger, succinctly explained the escalating situation to the duty officer. "We've got a fellow veteran being severely disrespected by local police, outright humiliated. It's Leonard Donovan, 82 years old, riding his Harley. I've known him for 15 years. He's an honest man, a pillar of this community. This is beyond a traffic stop." The officer on the other end of the line, initially dispassionate, abruptly shifted his tone the moment Marcus uttered the name. "Did you say Colonel Donovan?" "Leonard Grey Wolf Donovan." There was a brief, stunned silence on the line. "Hold on a second, Mr. Thorne." A moment later, the voice, now sharp with urgent command, returned. "Mr. Thorne, maintain visual contact. We're dispatching a Priority 1 tactical unit immediately. Do not let them do anything to Colonel Donovan until we arrive." "Colonel, I can't give you details over the phone, but be advised, we have Black Hawk protocol active. We will be there in exactly 15 minutes, no longer." The call ended. Marcus stepped closer to the road, his heart thumping against his ribs, a mixture of fear and growing anticipation. Colonel Grey Wolf. Len had never once mentioned his true military rank, or the legendary call sign associated with highly classified operations. Across the street, the absurdity reached a new crescendo. Officer Sterling, now utterly convinced of her authority and desperate to assert control, declared that Lynn needed to be taken in for a psychiatric evaluation. "Mr. Donovan, I'm going to need you to get in the vehicle. We're going to the hospital for an evaluation. This is for your own good." "I'm not going," Lynn stated flatly, his patience, finally, wearing thin, a subtle edge entering his voice. "What do you mean you're not going? This isn't a request. It's an order." "Based on what law?" Len challenged, his eyes unwavering, holding Sterling's gaze. Sterling hesitated, visibly faltering. There was no clear law allowing the arbitrary detention of an elderly man merely for riding an old motorcycle, no explicit regulation mandating a psychiatric evaluation without demonstrable, reasonable cause that she could readily cite. But now she was too deeply invested, too publicly exposed by the growing crowd, many of whom were filming the scene on their phones. Backing down would be an admission of severe misjudgment, a blow to her nascent career. "Elder protection law, behavior that puts his own safety at risk," she stammered, grasping at straws, her voice less confident now. Lynn, for the first time in the entire exchange, allowed himself a faint, almost imperceptible smile, the kind that acknowledges a familiar, poorly crafted lie. He'd faced far more elaborate deceptions, far more dangerous enemies. "Officer Sterling," Lynn asked, his voice still low, but with a new, dangerous undertone, "may I ask you a question? How many years have you been in service? How many conflicts have you truly witnessed?" Sterling bristled at the question, at the subtle, unnerving shift in power dynamics. "Mr. Donovan, get in the vehicle now." "I'm not going." "Then I'll have to use force," she threatened, her hand dropping decisively to her weapon's grip. Marcus, still watching from across the street, felt a surge of cold dread mixed with profound admiration. Whoever Leonard Donovan truly was, the man possessed an almost superhuman level of courage and composure. The crowd, sensing the rising tension, hushed, collectively holding their breath, aware that something significant, something potentially volatile, was about to unfold. And they were right. Far down the road, the distinct, growing rumble of powerful approaching vehicles grew louder, a sound unlike any local traffic. Len Donovan had no idea, but his unexpected cavalry, operating under the highest alert, was mere moments away. The sound registered first, a deep, powerful roar of engines, growing in intensity, shaking the very ground. Then, 12 sleek, black Humvees, moving with military precision and astonishing speed, rounded the bend, kicking up plumes of dust that momentarily obscured the morning sun. The imposing military vehicles converged on the scene, coming to a disciplined, synchronized halt in a semicircle that effectively encompassed the entire confrontation, their formidable presence dwarfing the lone patrol car. 50 impeccably uniformed soldiers, their faces etched with a silent, determined focus, emerged from the Humvees, their movements synchronized, a silent, formidable display of disciplined force. From the lead vehicle, a commanding army officer, her expression a mask of controlled fury, stepped out. Captain Rebecca Beck Evans, 55 years old, with 22 years of active, distinguished service, a veteran of countless classified missions, walked directly towards James Harris, her gaze bypassing the local officers entirely. As if they were mere inconvenient obstacles. She stopped precisely 3 meters away from Lynn, snapped to attention with a sharp, resounding crack of her hand against her temple, and delivered a salute that echoed with unyielding, profound respect. "Colonel Donovan." The word colonel detonated in the air like a flashbang grenade, its unexpected force ripping through the tension. Officers Sterling and Carter exchanged wild, panicked glances, their faces draining of all color, their earlier bravado instantly evaporating into stunned silence. "Sir, we were informed there was some sort of misunderstanding here," Sterling stammered, her voice now a thin, reedy whisper, attempting to regain a semblance of control, to salvage the rapidly collapsing situation. Captain Evans turned to the local officers for the first time, her eyes cutting like honed blades, a silent promise of swift, unforgiving consequences. Who dared to impede Colonel Donovan? Who dared to disrespect a living legend? Sterling, her voice now barely audible, a strained plea, tried to recover. "Officer Sterling, local police, we stopped this gentleman because—" "This gentleman?" Captain Evans's voice rose, no longer a growl but a low, dangerous roar that made Sterling flinch. Simultaneously, all 50 soldiers took a synchronized, deliberate step forward, their boots hitting the asphalt with a unified thud, an instinctive, almost primal display of unwavering support for their commander, a silent, intimidating wall of authority. "Captain, I didn't know he was military," Sterling pleaded, her composure crumbling, her eyes wide with dawning horror. "This man," Captain Evans announced, her voice ringing with proud, unshakable authority that reverberated through the now utterly silent street, served 3 tours in Vietnam, carried out intelligence operations in the Gulf and Afghanistan, and personally trained hundreds of U.S. Army officers, including myself. "This man you stopped, Officer Sterling, he holds 2 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts with 4 oak leaf clusters, and a Distinguished Service Cross. Colonel Donovan is not just a veteran. He is considered a living legend, a gray wolf in the United States Armed Forces. Soldiers from all over the country came to train under his guidance, to learn from his unparalleled experience, his wisdom." Captain Evans turned back to Sterling, her gaze unblinking, unwavering, pinning the young officer in place. "Officer, you utterly disrespected a decorated war hero who gave 60 years of his life in unwavering, silent service to your country. You publicly humiliated a man who has bled more for this nation than you could ever comprehend." Officer Carter, emboldened by a fleeting sense of self-preservation, tried to step in, a pathetic attempt at defense. "We were just doing our job." "Your job," Captain Evans retorted, her voice cold steel, slicing through his excuse, "is to protect and serve, not to publicly humiliate an 82-year-old man who has sacrificed everything in front of a growing crowd and the world. Your job is to know who you are serving." The shift in the gathered crowd was immediate and profound, a wave of collective realization washing over them. Cell phones were still recording, but now with a newfound reverence, the earlier ridicule replaced by a palpable sense of awe and shame. The murmurs had transformed completely. "Poor guy. That was absolutely awful. That officer really crossed the line." Officer Sterling, her face a mask of utter shame and regret, stepped closer to Lynn, her hands clasped in front of her. "Sir, Colonel Donovan, I am so deeply sorry. I truly didn't know. I made a terrible mistake." Lynn regarded her, his calm gaze unwavering, devoid of anger or triumph, only a quiet understanding. "Officer Sterling, may I offer you some advice?" "Yes, sir," she mumbled, humbled. "Never judge someone by their appearance. You have no idea what battles they've fought, what scars, visible and invisible, they carry inside." The lesson echoed not just for Sterling, but for every single person watching, every camera recording, every soul present. Captain Evans approached, her demeanor now respectful, no longer confrontational. "Colonel, is there anything you need? An escort? Transportation to your farm? A new tractor?" Lynn's lips curved into a faint, appreciative smile, a rare glimpse of warmth. "No, Captain," he replied, his voice soft. "But thank you for coming, sir. It was an unexpected intervention. We'll always be here, Colonel. Always. That's our promise." Lynn walked back to his old Harley, started its engine, the familiar rumble a comforting sound. The 50 soldiers stood in rigid formation, creating a formidable corridor of honor as he slowly rode away, the thunderous growl of his motorcycle a final, defiant punctuation mark to the morning's drama. As he disappeared down the road, A small smile touched Lynn's lips. The tractor was still broken, but something more important had been fixed today. 1 hour later, at the municipal police station, Sheriff Maria Gutierrez, 52 years old and a veteran of 15 years in office, received a terse, official call that cut through the usual precinct chatter. "Sheriff Gutierrez, this is Captain Evans, Fort Carson. We need to talk immediately about the incident this morning involving Colonel Donovan." Sheriff Gutierrez paused, her expression hardening, a premonition of significant trouble settling over her. "Captain, I'm already aware. I've spoken at length with Officers Sterling and Carter. And what exactly will be the procedure, Captain?" Sheriff Gutierrez hesitated, a faint tremor in her voice. She had known Ava Sterling for 5 years, a dedicated, if sometimes overzealous and slightly arrogant, officer with a promising career trajectory. "Captain, may I be frank?" "Please, Sheriff." Captain Evans's voice was steely, leaving no room for pretense. "My officers, while misguided, made a mistake in judgment, not a malicious crime. They acted out of ignorance, perhaps, but not deliberate malice. They're young and simply lacked proper training in this specific area." "Sheriff," Captain Evans's voice was clear, firm, leaving no room for misinterpretation. "Let me be equally clear. Colonel Donovan doesn't seek revenge. He's not initiating a lawsuit. He doesn't want to ruin anyone's career, nor would he ever allow it if we offered. But we, as a military institution, as a nation, cannot and will not accept our veterans, especially decorated heroes of his caliber, being treated this way. The public display of disrespect was not merely unacceptable, it was a profound insult to every man and woman who has ever worn a uniform, and to the values this country supposedly upholds." Sheriff Gutierrez understood the implicit, undeniable message, the immense political weight, the institutional pressure from the highest echelons of the military. The far-reaching consequences that went far beyond a local precinct's internal disciplinary actions. This wasn't just a local incident anymore. It was a national issue of honor. "What do you suggest, Captain?" "A mandatory, comprehensive training program, Sheriff, developed in close, collaborative partnership with our base's Veteran Affairs Unit. Your officers will spend dedicated time at Fort Carson, learning firsthand from our highest-ranking veterans about what it truly means to serve this country, about the profound sacrifices involved, and the proper, respectful protocols for interacting with all veterans, especially those with unseen wounds or complex histories. This will be more than a lecture, it will be an immersion." "It'll be done, Captain," Sheriff Gutierrez stated, her tone now one of resolute compliance. "Consider it implemented immediately." A week later, at the municipal precinct, Sheriff Gutierrez gathered all her officers for an emergency meeting, the air thick with tension and whispered speculation. "Everyone, starting today, we're implementing a new protocol for all field encounters, particularly those involving our elderly citizens and our valued veterans. And as a crucial part of this, all of you will be attending mandatory, in-depth training sessions at the military base, starting next Monday." Ava Sterling, her face still carrying a shadow of profound remorse, her usual confidence replaced by a somber humility, slowly stood up. "Colleagues," she began, her voice surprisingly steady, though tinged with vulnerability, "last week, I made a serious, inexcusable mistake. I disrespected a man who deserves, our deepest admiration, our unwavering respect. I acted out of ignorance, out of a lack of understanding that I now deeply regret. But I learned something far more important than procedures and regulations that day. I learned about human dignity, about the weight of unseen sacrifice." She looked around at her fellow officers, her gaze meeting theirs directly, pleading for their understanding. "Every person we stop on the street carries a story. Some of those stories are heavier than others, etched with silent battles. This isn't just about avoiding lawsuits or following protocols, it's about treating everyone, especially the elderly, with fundamental, basic respect, asking genuine questions before making assumptions, and truly listening before passing judgment. My actions were a disservice not just to Colonel Donovan, but to our badge, and I promise to do better." Her words hung in the air, a raw, honest confession that resonated with many in the room. Days later, Officer Ava Sterling found herself driving alone down Highway 340, her heart thumping with a mix of apprehension and a strange, burgeoning hope, a sense of quiet determination. The property, just as she remembered, was simple but impeccably well-kept. A humble, white-painted wooden house, a welcoming porch adorned with rocking chairs, a vibrant garden bursting with colorful, fragrant flowers, and a steadfast John Deere tractor parked beside a rustic barn, a testament to decades of hard work. Lynn Donovan was underneath the tractor, covered in grease-stained coveralls, diligently working on the hydraulic system with practiced hands. His old Harley, its chrome dulled by age but gleaming with untold stories, rested in the shade of a large, ancient oak tree, a silent sentinel. Sterling pulled up in her patrol car, switched off the engine, took a deep, fortifying breath, and walked over to where Lynn was working, a new kind of respect guiding her steps. "Colonel Donovan?" Lynn slid out from under the tractor, wiping his hands on an old rag, his eyes, clear and calm, meeting hers. "Officer Sterling, can I help you?" "Sir, I came to talk, if that's all right with you," she replied, her voice soft, almost hesitant. Lynn's eyes twinkled with a hint of amusement, perhaps recognizing a genuine, profound shift in her demeanor, a flicker of understanding. "Want some coffee?" "Just made a fresh pot. My famous farm blend." Inside the modest, warm kitchen, filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sun-warmed spices, Lynn poured steaming coffee into 2 blue ceramic mugs, slightly chipped but comforting. He sat at an old, sturdy wooden table and motioned for Sterling to take the seat across from him, a gesture of unexpected hospitality. "Officer," Lynn began, his voice gentle, paternal, "may I ask you a few questions?" Sterling nodded, eager to learn. "Of course, sir. Why did you become a police officer? What truly motivates you?" Sterling wasn't expecting such a personal, profound question, unprepared for the introspection it demanded. "I wanted to help people," she answered, her voice finding its earnestness, "to make a tangible difference in the community, to serve, in my own way." "How many serious accidents caused by elderly drivers have you personally responded to in your career, Officer Sterling?" "Very few, actually," she admitted, reflecting thoughtfully. "Most of the accidents I see, the truly severe ones, are caused by younger drivers, distracted, impaired, speeding, texting." Lynn offered a gentle, knowing smile, a quiet acknowledgement of the undeniable truth. "Then why, Officer Sterling," he asked, his voice soft but piercing, "did you assume I was the problem that day? Why did you dismiss my reality based on a single glance?" Sterling couldn't answer. The truth was too obvious, too raw, too painful, a stark reflection of her past biases. Lynn stood and walked to the window, his gaze sweeping over his thriving farm, his cows grazing peacefully in the sun-drenched pasture, a scene of quiet resilience. "Respect isn't earned just by a uniform or a rank," he said softly, his voice carrying the accumulated weight of decades of wisdom, a quiet sermon. "It's earned by how you treat others, no matter their age, their background, the language they speak, or the battles they've fought that you cannot see. It's earned by seeing the whole person, not just the fleeting moment." Sterling looked out the window at the old Harley, its chrome dulled by age but gleaming under the sunlight, a silent testament to enduring spirit. She realized, with a profound sense of humility and a nascent understanding, that Leonard Donovan had been riding that bike longer than she had been alive, that its every dent and scratch told a story. That 1970 Harley-Davidson still made its distinctive noise, still looked old and rusty, but it still worked with an enduring, unwavering reliability. It still got Lynn where he needed to go, a loyal companion on his journey. That motorcycle, like Colonel Donovan himself, still had many roads to travel, many stories yet to unfold. And for Officer Ava Sterling, her own path had just taken a crucial, humbling, and ultimately transformative turn towards a deeper, more empathetic understanding of service, of respect, and of the invisible battles fought every single day, often by those least expected. The coffee, now cool, tasted of truth.